Hi everyone, thanks for joining. I'll be presenting some preliminary data results related to anemia among women shellfishers from the communities in the Women Shellfishers and Food Security Project. This data has been collected in collaboration with my colleague Dr. Seth Adu-Afarwuah from the University of Ghana Department of Nutrition and Food Science, and will both be available for questions after the presentation. So why focus on anemia? The first thing to be aware of is that among West African coastal countries, anemia prevalence among women ranges from 35 to 52%. This is in stark contrast to anemia prevalence in countries such as the US, where it's more around 10 to 15%. Anemia, which is defined as hemoglobin less than 12 grams per deciliter in the blood, is a risk factor for key birth outcomes that are of global health importance, such as low birth weight and preterm birth. And in addition, women with anemia have an 84% increased risk of postpartum hemorrhage, which is the leading cause of maternal death around the globe. So, why focus on oysters? When we look at what's causing anemia, it's recognized that low dietary intake of iron is a fundamental cause of anemia. Other causes of anemia can include infection, but low dietary intake is seen as roughly accounting for at least 50% of anemia in many countries. Zinc and iron deficiencies are common in West Africa, and one serving of oysters meets 100% of the zinc recommended dietary allowance, or RDA, and it meets 26% of the iron RDA for women. So oysters seem to be an excellent food source for both zinc and iron. So some concerns when we think about oysters in West Africa is that if ecosystems are poorly managed, there may be less availability of oysters and other shellfish. So in the long run, communities may end up losing a potentially vital resource that addresses anemia and food insecurity. However, sometimes critical to having good management practices is doing things like annual temporary closures to allow the oysters populations to replenish itself. While such practices are important for good management of the ecosystems, it's important to be aware that such practices may have short-term impacts on nutrition. So that's something that we need to be paying attention to as we think about addressing management systems. The other thing to be aware of is heavy metals and other pollutants that have been documented in some estuaries and are potentially detrimental to human health. So if oysters are recognized as an excellent source of iron and zinc, we'd like to be able to tell women that they can consume them as a food source for these essential micronutrients. But we don't want to be then accidentally leading to higher heavy metal concentration in their blood. And so we need to keep an eye on that in oysters as well. So for our part of the study, we're really focused on assessing dietary intake, food security, and anemia among the women in these shellfishing communities. We've been able to enroll a little over 700 women, with 504 women in Ghana and 214 women in the Gambia. We have limited the age range of these women to 15 to 49 years of age because that is the standard window of age for women of reproductive age, which are the group of women that are at highest risk for anemia. We're using questionnaire interview data to investigate what factors are related to anemia. We'll be examining questions such as, is higher oyster consumption associated with a lower risk of anemia? And on the right, you can see a picture here of how anemia is measured. So a finger prick is performed on the woman. 1 drop of blood is taken and put in a HemoQ device. Within a matter of minutes, we get the results of her hemoglobin concentration. And it's a great benefit to the woman as well, because then at that moment, we're able to tell her if she's below or above the cutoff for being defined as anemic, and we can make referrals as needed. In addition, we're collecting oysters from each study site in Ghana. So right now we do have our colleagues have some preliminary data on heavy metal contamination amongst some oysters, but we'll be doing a more extensive sample, and we'll also be analyzing the oysters for iron and zinc. So in terms of our preliminary results, I'll be presenting study population characteristics, as well as hemoglobin concentration and anemia prevalence. We're still in the midst of analyzing our dietary data. Looking at the study population characteristics, we can see that in Ghana, the women on average are 32 right around 30.7 to 32.2 years of age. So a pretty consistent age bracket in Ghana. Looking at the Gambia, we see a wider range, with the Bulak area having 29.8 and the Alahin estuary going to 34.4 years of age. It should be noted that this is kind of a younger age than the typical woman shellfisher, but because we're limiting it to women 15 to 49, it's not a surprise that this is the mean age. Looking at whether the women ever attended school. In Ghana, we see that ranges from 56% to 81%, with Narkwa Lagoon having the lowest percentage of women attending school, and the Densu estuary and Win estuary being roughly similar. Looking at the Gambia, we see a lower percentage, going down to 49% in Alahin, and the highest being 67% in the Bulak area. Looking at BMI, we see that in Ghana, the BMI ranges from 22.9 to 26.6, with Narkwa having the lowest and Densu having the highest. Over at the Gambia, we see the lowest is in Tambi wetland at 24.7, and then Alahin has a BMI at 27.5. It's important to note that when we talk about overweight or obesity, the BMI cutoff is anything greater than 25. And so we can see that in Ghana, overweight and obesity prevalence is 25% in Narkwa Lagoon and goes up to 59% in the Densu estuary. Looking at the Gambia, we see it ranging from 41 to 57%. These are relatively high percentages that, but unfortunately is not that uncommon anymore. We have seen increasing obesity rates in lower and middle income countries, just like we see in the US. It's important to note these overweight and obesity rates are increasing, while these countries are still struggling to address micronutrient deficiencies. So looking at mean hemoglobin concentration by site, we can see that in Ghana, the Densu estuary has the lowest hemoglobin concentration, mean hemoglobin concentration at 12.6, and the Win estuary has the highest at 13.4. The Gambia across the sites is lower, with right around ranging from just above 12 to 12.4. So that's something to pay attention to as we look across countries. And this is also reflected when we look at the prevalence of anemia by site. So with Densu having the lowest hemoglobin concentration, it's not a surprise they have the highest percent of women with anemia at 25%. The Win estuary is closer to 15%. And in the Gambia, we do see that that all 3 sites are all above 35%, with the Bulak area having the highest prevalence, just above 45%. So our future analysis is then going to be looking at how this relates to oyster consumption and food insecurity, and we're really excited to examine those results, particularly seeing differences in anemia prevalence in these sites. The potential impact we expect is that results from the study can be used to better understand factors related to nutrition and health, and resource managers can use this data in the design of sustainable management actions. Health policymakers will then also be able to use this data to guide diet recommendations for women at risk of anemia. Thank you, everyone.